There was an argument that I was having with myself. One, don't talk about these things because you're a veteran and veterans don't do that. Two, they've got no right to know. But yet, on the other side of that coin, if I don't talk about these guys, who's gonna know what they did? And this is Riley. He was our 60 machine gunner. He took a direct hit on August the 14th, 1968. Still breaks your heart. This is Dominguez Rodriguez. He was killed.
Eric Shelly is a Vietnam War veteran, and the trauma of war left wounds he was unable to confront for 45 years.
And I kept wondering, why am I seem like I can't fit into civilian life like I thought would be a snap when I come home? I thought maybe I'm not the man that I think I am, or maybe my father was, or those I served with were. When you lose people and they go home in a bag, it affects you. It's like I had this vision one time of my great-grandparents had a walk-in closet, and there was a light bulb in the middle of the ceiling. You pull on a string and it would come on. It was like you were trying to get all of these emotions, these sights, these sounds that you had experienced, the loss of friends, all this stuff, combat assaults, everything, into that room, shut the door, lock it, and then nail 2x4s across it. And then 20, 30, 40 years later, you walk by, and there's stuff coming out from under that door, and that door is bulging. You've got to do something about it. When I was busy working, and I worked on the thoroughbred racetrack most of my life, always around horses and dogs, 7 days a week, and I loved it. But when I retired from that, I had a lot of time on my hands, and like my doctor at the VA, Dr. Kruger, said, that's when these things start to surface, and it did. And that's where my wife, Eva, came on the scene and told me one day in our TV room, Eric, things aren't right between us, and we're not leaving this room until we get this settled. And she told me just not too long ago that she didn't know me when that happened. And I don't wonder why. I was a different person. These things were all coming out. I didn't know how to deal with them. I never knew how to talk about what's inside because I kept hiding it because I didn't want to revisit these things again.
Honor Flight inspired Eric to finally write a book, sharing his experiences and the stories of those he served with as a 20-year-old soldier.
Honor Flight, that trip, helped me to be able to open up and talk about the deeper things that I think most combat vets bring home with them, that are always just out of sight, just below the surface, but just one thought away at any time, day or night. And they helped me to face that. We were there to kill them, they were there to kill us. That's the way it was. There's almost an instantaneous dividing line you have to get over when you first get to a combat situation, and that's don't kill. Life is precious, and it is against God's laws to take a life. Then you move over here on the other side of that line in Vietnam in a combat zone, and that's what you do. That's what your job is, killing. And you're 18, 19, 20 years old, and you still haven't figured all this stuff out yet in your own mind. You think you're a man already. It's a big wake-up call, and you bring home that stuff. And I told him, and Dr. Kruger asked us in the vet-on-vet class one time at the VA, what do you think you would do if you was forced or put in a position where you had to take a life? I didn't hesitate, and I just said, killing is easy. All you have to do is point your weapon and pull the trigger. And everybody got quiet for a couple of minutes there, and I looked around and I, well, maybe I shouldn't have said that. And I said, no, that's the truth. And then I said, The hard part is remembering it for the rest of your life, that you've taken a life. There was an NVA, North Vietnamese Army soldier, quite a good possibility that I might have killed him. And I was searching that Army soldier's body, and I saw the picture of his wife and little baby girl. I don't know how many times my brain has taken that picture and his face. I've seen them thousands of times, and they never fade. You deal with it. Some of the stories in my manuscript, I've struggled with writing them because I didn't want to go there again. But I felt like I needed to. And it wasn't about talking about me or what I'd done. It was about those I had served with. And I didn't realize it until after I finished that manuscript in a couple of weeks, and it was almost instantaneous. I was a different person because I had written about, let these things out. And I remember looking at that spiral ring notebook I had in front of me and my pen. I was writing and staying between the lines, but I don't remember looking at it. I remember watching this stuff in my mind. And it was like at that point, that inanimate spiral notebook became my friend. And I could tell it everything. On August the 14th, we lost 14 out of 2 platoons, and we had I'm gonna say, I don't know for sure, at least 14 more wounded. 28 guys, that's over 1 platoon or 1/4 of the company. And most of the time we were only about 99 guys in the company. And at that point in time, I didn't think I was gonna make it home. I still had 3.5 months to go. I was an old guy at that time. What's considered an old guy, as in time and country. And I don't like talking about this, but 3 days after that, and I wrote about it in my book, I had to go identify with my squad leader and another guy in our squad, identify our dead. 14 guys in body bags, gone. Later that day, we'd identified our dead. My squad leader and the other guy in our squad had gone in to try to go to sleep. I said, I'm going to set up a while. I don't think I can sleep after doing that. Finally, I was exhausted, and I just said to myself, I'm going in the tent and go to sleep. And it was one of those rare occasions. We were sleeping on cots. There was about 16 of us, 8 on each side of the tent, wood floor. I laid down on my cot, and I laid my M16 right next to me on the cot. And I started to cry. And I was ashamed. And I cried and I cried. My eyes watered, my nose ran, my nose and throat were sore, my eyes burned. And I thought to myself, if those 14 guys I knew could die for their country, I could damn sure shed a tear for them. And if somebody doesn't like it and hears me, then they can do whatever they want to do with it. I'm going to shed a tear for my friends. And I finally fell to an exhausted, emotional sleep. And I never cried again for another 47 years. Not once. That emotion thing that emotional numbing thing had taken over completely, and I didn't care. I did not care. It's what we came to know in Vietnam as being desensitized. You had seen so much of this stuff, combat, losing friends, the rotation system. You get close to somebody, and if they survived, they went home. Some new guy came in that you didn't want to know, because the less you knew about him, if something happened, the easier it was to deal with it emotionally. Immediately after, where we'd lost all those people, killed and wounded, there was a new guy that came in, Johnny Gibson, who tried to show everybody on the fire base a picture of his young wife and baby. And she was just laughing there on the end of her mother's lap. Her mother was smiling, beautiful young lady, and that little girl was looking over at, I'm sure it was him, at her daddy. And he wanted everybody in the company to know what they looked like. He didn't just love them, he worshiped them. And I was sitting up on the top of the hill that day and leaning against an old dead log or something. And I saw him out of the corner of my eye coming my way. And as he walked to me, he had that smile on his face. And he was looking at that picture. And I don't know why I didn't get up and walk away or just tell him, I can't do this. I don't want to know personal stuff about you, and leave, but I didn't. And he said, Shelly, have you seen my picture of my wife and baby? And he lifted it over his head like that to me. And I took it and looked at it, and I thought, oh gosh, I shouldn't have done this, because there it was, instantaneous, imprinted on my mind. And I handed it back to him. I said, yeah, Gibson, you've got a really nice family. He was killed a short time later, and I wish with everything I've got that I could ask him a couple of questions about his wife. What was her name? How long had they been married? What was the little girl's name? How old was she? But I didn't. But at that time, it was self-preservation to me, and it's something I had to do. I didn't want to know. I didn't want to know her name, how long I didn't want to know any of those things. You don't want any more of the emotional gut punches. So I did my thing, and I think a lot of other veterans, combat veterans do too. You just shut out.
Returning from war, Eric was not prepared for the level of disrespect, even contempt, some Americans had towards Vietnam veterans.
We were run through a big warehouse and got our dress uniforms with the decorations on them. Nobody said a word to me. I sat in the middle seat all the way to LAX. Nobody said anything there in that terminal. I took the plane to my mom and dad's house in Phoenix, Arizona, sat in the middle seat again. Nobody said boo, nothing. I didn't expect a parade. I didn't expect anything like that, but just one welcome home soldier would have meant so much. An American soldier coming home to his country, and nobody would even hardly look at you. That's the welcome we got home, and it made us all bitter. And that was the way that a large part of the American people treated us when we came home, the way they lied about us. Being baby killers, we weren't. Being women killers, we weren't. None of us went over there to kill innocent civilians. But they lied about us anyway, and it's never been corrected. And I have friends, one of them rode right next to me on honor flight, served with the 1st Air Cav. He was spit on when he came home. He'd been wounded. And I have others that could tell you the same thing. That leaves a bad taste in your mouth. I looked at it as a betrayal from my own country. we were asked to do a job, we did it, and then were lied about and spit on. What the main problem for me was that these people had treated us this way, and I'd left buddies in Vietnam who died for their right to lie, who would never live their lives out, never get married, never fall in love, never have children, never live their lives. And they to me, I absolutely hated them for that.
That anger would eat away at Eric for decades.
It was like these emotions that I was suppressing, thought I'd hidden away, were just living on this hate inside me. And the more I hated, the more they needed the next day. And the more I kept trying to stuff this away, the more they kept pushing it out. It was not a good place to be. I wanted to be by myself as much as possible. If you didn't have 4 legs, a horse or a dog, I didn't care to know you. I wouldn't bother to give you the time of day. I hated the American left that lied about us as much or more than I hated our enemy in Vietnam. And that's a lot of people are probably going to say that's a terrible thing to say, but it was the truth. But I knew that wasn't right, and I had to get rid of that hate. But how? Because I felt if I got rid of that hate, I would be betraying those who didn't come home that I had served with. Getting rid of that hate is paramount, I think, because call it the forces in you that have that hate. They want you to hang on to that no matter what. You don't need help, Eric. You're a combat veteran. You can handle this. That other stuff's silly. That's for sissies. You can do this. Until I got to the point and said, no, I can't do this. And it felt like my whole heart was just going to come out of my chest. And things had got so bad with me, everything at that point in my life was going south. You name it, it was already headed there.
Eric's wife, Eva, made him promise he would get some help.
I thought I'd give my word to my wife that I would do this, and I went to the VA and got enrolled in their PTSD program down there. I had thought prior to that it was a bunch of hooey, just some veterans wanting to get together in camouflage clothing and drink beer. I didn't want any of that. I didn't want to tell you my war stories, and I didn't want to hear yours.
PTSD therapy through the VA hospital slowly started to change that.
Everything wasn't perfect, but I had started to open up.
Eric was encouraged by the progress he'd made just through therapy, but he had no idea how much more healing could be possible for him until an honor flight to the Vietnam Memorial Wall in Washington, D.C.
I thought I had all these emotions handled and put away until I got to the Vietnam Memorial Wall. And I've got 37 or 39 friends on the wall, and I've only found probably 16 of them. So, honor flight was kind of the frosting on the cake, if you will, that pushed me through the crack in that door and let me open up. As soon as I got home, the next meeting we had at the VA for the PTSD stuff, I told everybody in there, I got tears in my eyes. And I told them, you've got to do this.
What do you think are the things that prevent a lot of veterans from giving themselves permission to go?
I think there's a number of things. I think it's anger. Things I've alluded to already here, but not wanting to look past that. And I don't mean you have to let it go completely. I haven't. I'm no one to talk. But you gotta look beyond it. I think a fear of facing these things, these emotions that they've kept inside their heart and their minds for so long. They don't want to look at them again. I didn't. It wasn't easy. But it's one of the best things I've done, is getting that stuff out there, writing about it, talking about it. It's not easy getting there, but once you start to do it, who cares if I cry? Who's gonna know it in 50 years? Nobody. And letting it out, it doesn't go away, it's there, but you look at it in a different perspective.
It was just a 36-hour flight to Washington, D.C. for a day and back. But Eric was returning a different person. And when he stepped off the plane, the homecoming at the Spokane airport was almost overwhelming.
I remember everybody was laughing and talking on the flight home, and the pilot came on the PA system and he said, have your attention, we've been told by Spokane Tower that there's 600 people there waiting to greet you. That whole plane, I mean, you could have heard a pin drop even above the roar of the engines outside. It's how quiet it got. And I sat back in my seat and started thinking, how am I going to get out of this? What am I going to do with these emotions if they start coming to the surface? I didn't know. And that's scary. And it's the best thing I ever done. When I got down there and got to doing it, shaking hands and thanking people for coming out and looking them in the eye and seeing their sincerity, I got the feeling that the American people, or at least some of them, really did want to thank us and appreciated our service.
The longing to hear the words, "Welcome home, soldier. Thank you for your service and your sacrifice," finally heard.
That was a homecoming that the Vietnam veterans never got. Bottom line, Honor Flight was instrumental in changing my life. And I'm a volunteer today. Honor Flight is a healing process, not just a fun trip. And it's the best thing I've ever done for myself in my life. I can sit here and say this because things happen to me in a positive way. But those veterans who have taken their lives, they didn't get there, and they deserve to be there. They served their country. And that's why I do stuff like this for them.